Hey, so today I'm talking to Nassos Conqueso. Hi, how are you?
Hello, Vic. I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you very much. Mind you, I have got a jumper on. It's pretty miserable over here, weather-wise. But yeah, apart from that, all good. So now, my traditional first question, and if people are watching the video, this is a bit of a giveaway because you've got so many guitars floating around in the background there. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm mainly a guitarist. I teach guitar, I play guitar in bands, and I release my own music. But I also like playing other instruments, so I may say that I'm a multi-instrumentalist. So some of the headstocks are not from guitars, might be a baglamas or another traditional Greek instrument
Oh, okay. All
background.
right.
But
Okay.
I always trust the telly.
All right. Yes. Awesome stuff. So obviously people will be aware that you live somewhere else. So where are you? Where are you
Yeah,
based?
yeah. So I live in Athens, in Greece. The thing is that I used to spend a lot of time in Britain, actually, before the crisis. Before, sorry, not the crisis, the COVID pandemic and all that stuff.
Yeah, because we've got more than one crisis here. So yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So because I did my master's in Britain, and then I started a PhD in music in Britain. So I used to spend a lot of time there as well. Yeah, but my basis is here in Athens, where I teach in various music schools and conservatoires. Um, and I used to visit Bath a lot in Britain.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Nice place, Bath. Very, very elegant. What we term as elegant. So yeah, it was an amazing place. Not very much like the rest of Britain, I must say.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Quite unique. Yeah,
the
yeah.
architecture is different, and yeah, but I really like it there.
So how often do you have to come over then? Just out of interest.
Well, the thing is that when I did my master's, I didn't have to spend the whole year there because all the one-in-one lessons were through Skype. So I had to visit thrice a year, perhaps. I visited in September, which also coincided with the RGT conference when we were lucky to to do the RGT conferences. So I would participate at the conference too. And then I usually come back in January or February or something like that. And then again in June, if I remember correctly. Then when I started the PhD, things changed a bit. So it was more unpredictable, both the times that I had to visit Britain and the times of the year. It was more sporadic, but in different ways.
So you said you were a multi-instrumentalist. So the
Yeah.
question is, obviously, you were interested in music very early on. I mean, when did you? What's your earliest recollections of being interested in playing an instrument?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
What was your earliest
Oh, the
memory?
early.
Yeah, being interested in music.
Okay. Well, I remember since I was very young, I really wanted to. When there was something on TV and there was a band, regardless of the style of music, I was really interested in hearing the music and watching the performance. I remember I was listening to jazz music, for example, and but I didn't know what kind of music it was back then. So I think at the age of 5 or 6, I wanted to learn an instrument, but there was only the piano available in my school. So I had some lessons in piano back then, but I didn't really like the piano. And then I discovered, perhaps at the age of 10 or 11, a classical guitar. My father had bought a classical guitar, but he had already passed away, so I wasn't aware of that, and I coincidentally found this classical guitar, and I tried to teach myself. So this is perhaps the first time that I had an experience with a guitar. What was also strange was the fact that even though I was listening to so many different styles of music, I wouldn't imagine that I would learn to play jazz on guitar. I was thinking that I want to play something like Eric Clapton, for example. I like the blues a lot back then, and now, of course. But I mean, I wanted to play like Eric Clapton, like Buddy Guy, and guys like them. And the thing is that I learned some stuff alone, but then there was a dead end for me, so I quit for perhaps 2 or 3 years. And then I did my second attempt. I bought a book, a random book, that had chord shapes and a couple of scales, and I tried to learn everything on that book. I was lucky because I managed to learn all the shapes correctly. I wasn't doing weird fingering positions. So I was self-taught up to the age of 18.
Right. This is
Yeah.
this is interesting because it sort of implies that there wasn't an awful lot of stuff available. If you're working like on one book, it sounds like you had the one book and you were working on it. Because I've had this conversation with a number of people, because a lot of people contemporary with me in this country, the only way that you could learn things was to buy an album and sit down and work it out off the album, right? Because the books weren't correct and all the rest of it. And I think that thing of focusing on just a little bit of stuff, as you say, like chord shapes and, a few scales, chords, or an album that you could work the stuff off, it really developed the technique better than just having this overwhelming stuff, because everything's available now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that sort of creates a different sort of player. I don't know what whether you feel the same way, that maybe that just sort of limiting yourself like that makes a positive, like foundations to your playing. Maybe that's not the right word.
Perhaps yes. Because I mean, nowadays, when I try to practice something new, there are so many things. It's limitless. So, yeah. So I'm thinking that I cannot decide for myself what I want to. So I can imagine that for younger people, for students, for beginners, total beginners, it would be really, really difficult to. Some of them might be very lucky. Some of them have all the information and they coincidentally take the right path, or they're very gifted, and they can learn and become great players. But I think, yeah, I agree with you. It's difficult, and what I do nowadays, it's I try to be creative with something. So instead of trying to practice something new, I say, okay, I'm going to write something that is going to challenge me, and this is perhaps the way of learning something new for me. Not
yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I get that, because you obviously have to challenge yourself. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to put yourself in a sort of a situation where you have to think differently from just habitual playing. So you said you got to the age of 18. Right?
Yeah.
So that implies at the age of 18, you must have had some lessons.
Yes, indeed. I already had some experience with proper music notation, because coincidentally, at the age of 16 or 17, I met a classmate in high school that he was learning classical guitar. And one day he told me that, all this pop and rock stuff are really easy. So he gave me Asturias, and he told me, if you can
Oh,
learn
yeah. Okay. It's a good one to start on.
yeah, if you can learn this, then I will say that you're the best guitarist in school or something like that. So I said, okay, give me some months and I will try to interpret the notes. So I started learning how notation works by myself, because I was playing something and a sharp was missing, and I could listen that I was playing something wrong. So this is the way I learned key signatures and things like that. And then, but after that, I finished high school and I didn't know what else to do. So there was an electric guitarist, rock electric guitarist in Greece that I really admired. He had a band, Socrates Drank the Conium, which was for some period of time huge even in other countries except for Greece. But he wasn't living in Athens at the time, so I ended up having lessons with Pantelis Gertsos. You have already
Pantelis, yeah.
had a podcast with him, and I
Yes,
know
yeah.
you know him for too many years.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started having lessons with Pantelis at the age of 18 or 19, something like that.
Yeah. So that obviously must have changed how you saw, how to play.
Yes.
And so what did you do then? Did you sort of, was that there sort of a point in time then when you started to think, this is actually really what I want to do?
I think since the age of 16 I wanted to do that.
Right.
But the problem was that in Greece we only had musicology degrees, so I didn't know anybody
Right.
until the age of 19 or 20 that had studied music performance or music composition. So yeah, then I realized that Pantelis has a few students that have traveled abroad to do a bachelor's degree in UWL, for example, or in another institution in Britain, and other pupils that went to do a bachelor's degree in the Netherlands. And I said, okay, that's a nice opportunity. So I said, I'll try to, because since I was already 19, I was studying at the university, but a completely different course. I was studying computer science.
Oh, okay.
So I said, okay, I'll try to finish my degree on time, and then I will travel to Britain to do a bachelor's degree in music composition or music performance, something like that. So at that point, I said, okay, this is the only time this is the right time actually to do it.
Right.
And this is actually what I did. There was an unfortunate event, because I became accepted by the universities that I had applied to, but I hadn't realized that there was back then there was a category called ELQ, equivalent or lower qualifications. So
Okay.
if you had applied for a degree that is of equivalent level or lower level from the one that you have already acquired, you had
Yes.
to pay more fees.
Really?
Yes.
How does that? I don't understand that. How does that? Why is that?
Because it's a second degree, so you can already find a job with your first degree, and this is like doing a second degree for fun or something like that.
Oh, okay. Is that to do with, obviously to do with funding?
Perhaps. I know that I was exempted from funding as well, or from getting a loan from
Right.
studentships and things like that
Right.
at the bachelor's degree level. I could apply for funding if I wanted to do a master's degree, but I couldn't do that for a bachelor's degree.
Right. Okay, I get you. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, sort of doesn't make sense, but I sort of get the logic behind it. Yeah. So
But there was a huge there was a huge difference in the fees, because back then, because it was 2010, the fees were like 3,100, something like that, per year, and I had to pay something like 15,500 or 700, something like that. It was 5 times more expensive for me if I wanted to do that. At least for the 3 or 4 first options in my list of universities. So it was it was really weird.
crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Oh, yeah. See, I've always, because when I started off, there wasn't really anything available in this country, really. I mean, there was one university, I think it was York, did something. It was like a jazz degree, but apart from that, there was really nothing else unless you wanted to do classical. So I just, like everybody did, you just got on with it, and now, of course, I see it, and when people want to do stuff like that, it's like, well, it depends where you want to go, what you want to do with music, and for some people, they've just done loads of education. They don't want to do college and all the rest of it. But for some others, they do. But then it's this sort of like costing, isn't it? It's like, well, if this is going to cost me this, what's the benefit? Cost analysis.
Yeah.
But the thing that's always struck me, and I've mentioned this to Pantelis, the Greeks are great at studying. You are really, really studious people, I must say. And there's a different sort of mentality, I think, that you have, that you really want to, work hard at what you do. It's not just the practice, it's just, doing the study. And I don't even know if we've got that sort of mentality. It's quite interesting. It is interesting. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's maybe just different. I don't know. Interestingly, but obviously it's benefited you a lot, hasn't it?
Perhaps.
Okay.
I don't know yet. I will tell you after I complete my my PhD.
Right. Okay. So I'm assuming that you got involved in teaching quite early on, did you?
Yes. Because the thing is that since I couldn't afford coming to Britain to do the bachelor's degree, I said, all right, I'll try to get involved to as many things in music as possible in Greece. So I applied to study music harmony at a conservatoire, which is classical music theory. You couldn't do any popular music theory in Greece, so I had to do to learn how to do counterpoint and 4-part Bach chorales and things like that. And I started advertising at the same time as a guitar teacher. I already had a grade 8, and I started studied for the DeepLCM teaching diploma at that time. So then is when I also met my second teacher, who was doing with whom I was studying music harmony, and perhaps you also know him, Nikos.
Nikos, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And thankfully, Pantelis and Nikos proposed that I should work for the LCM office, the London College of Music Examinations office in Athens. So I also started working for them as well, helping them organize the exams in Athens and communicating with the examiners and the university and all that stuff. So yeah, at the beginning I wasn't. I was doing only private tuition, but I think up to I think in 2 years' time or something like that, I had a proposal from a music school, and I started teaching electric guitar and ukulele actually. In
Right. Okay. So that brings us neatly onto the fact that you said there's lots of other instruments there that look like guitars, but they're not. So okay. So you've got the ukulele.
Yeah.
So what else do you play? So come on then. So
yeah, the piano, because it was compulsory for my music harmony.
Yeah.
So I would say that these are the three strongest: guitar, piano, and ukulele. And then one of my favorites is the baglamas.
Okay.
This little instrument.
Oh, okay, all right. So it's like a small bouzouki.
Exactly, it's like the equivalent of a ukulele.
Oh, okay, right. Right.
Yeah, but it's one of the. I'd say it's like the key instrument in the Greek rebetiko folk music. The two main instruments of Greek rebetiko is the bouzouki,
Yeah.
with the 3 pairs of strings, and the baglamas, which has the identical tuning with the bouzouki. So if you learn how to play the bouzouki, you can, and your fingers can fit in the small gaps, you can also play the baglamas.
Right. So this instrument, does it actually sound higher, or is it just a similar sort of register? Yeah.
Okay. It's higher than a lot higher than
the book. So it's got a baglamas. Baglamas. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
And there are other instruments that are similar to that. I have a juras. This looks more like a bouzouki.
Yeah.
But it's what we call juras. It has the size of the neck is similar to a bouzouki, but the body is smaller.
Yeah.
And has once again
the
same tuning, DAD.
Yeah. Right. Amazing.
Something
that always fascinated me about Greek music, and obviously Greek guitar players, is the fact that they're so technically proficient. And I think I must have said this to Pantelis. Is it because the sort of bouzouki sound is sort of in your head anyway? Because you hear it so much, because it's just incredibly fast. You know what I mean? The sort of what people can do on a bouzouki.
Yeah.
Is incredible, and it's sort of, it sort of lends itself to, like, heavy rock shredding, if you sort of mean. It's got I've sort of been fascinated by that, because there is something I think there is, for me, when I've observed. Well, I haven't been to Greece for quite a number of years, but when I've seen people play, and I've watched bouzouki players, and I've watched other people play guitar, I think there's something in this. The fingers are doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
Lightning speed. It's amazing. So, did you find them difficult to learn, or was it just typical with, like, if you're a guitarist, you can just pick up another stringed instrument, just basically work out how to play it?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to play traditional folk bouzouki, it's a different story, because they use different scales. They use some modes that come from Turkish makam and Byzantine ihi. So it's a different story.
What's the mode like? What's the scale like that they use? Is it like because I know a little bit about Turkish.
There are various scales. The easiest ones resemble Western music. Like, for example, there is Rast scale, which ascends like the major scale, but descends as a mixolydian.
Okay, right. So it comes down to the flattened seventh. That is actually very similar to, there's a raga in Indian music that does the same thing, goes up a major scale and comes down with a flattened seventh. That's interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. There are some commonalities between all these.
Yeah. So what others are there? You've whet my appetite.
Yeah, so for example, another one that you will easily recognize, but is very, very typical in this kind of music, is what we call Hijaz.
Oh, yeah, I know this one. Yeah.
But the Western equivalent is Phrygian dominant.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, is that bouzouki players think in terms of tetrachords and pentachords. They don't think in terms of scales. So they would say that I will use a Hijaz tetrachord and I connect this with another Hijaz tetrachord and I create this scale.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah,
and
that
then,
makes sense. Yeah.
And then they begin their improvisation within 4 or 5 notes, and then you do not know from the beginning which scale they have chosen. They play only 5 notes back and forth, and after when they find a phrase or a lick or something that they like, they then extend their improvisation to the upper part of the octave. So they may start with Hijaz, but they might end up with what we call Hijaskar, which is like a cousin scale. The Western equivalent is double harmonic major.
Yeah. I got that. Yeah. I got that. This probably will mean nothing to anybody else listening, but I don't care. I like.
That's good.
Yeah, it's cool. That's cool. Brilliant stuff. So when because there's always been, again, talking about Pantelis, there was always this sort of friction between, your traditional music, because, obviously it's not, I think primarily because of tourism. It's sort of everywhere and you can't escape it. And Pantelis and I sort of spoke quite a bit when I was over there about what places were available in Athens at the time that you could play rock music or whatever, or there were places that did jazz, but of course just about everywhere had traditional folk music going on or something like it, because in every restaurant, whatever. Do you feel that there is still a friction between that and contemporary music, or is that not so bad now? Because there must be quite a few of you out there playing, music that's not for tourists.
Yeah. I might say that there are two schools of thought nowadays, because a lot of pop artists employ bouzouki in pop music, so they take the scales and the chord progressions from Western pop music, and then they just add the bouzouki, but they don't use the 3-chords bouzouki. They use the 4-chords bouzouki that has 4 pairs of strings and a different tuning. And it has I might say, perhaps a darker sound. So they keep playing the same stuff. They try to follow the trends. So this is still going on and has been going on for, 50 years or something like that. And nowadays there are a few people that try to combine some traditions from Rebetiko or Cretan music or other folk Greek music, and they try to blend this with other styles of music, like stoner rock, for example. There is a great band that combines folk music from Epirus, that is in north west Greece,
with
stoner rock, and it's really nice. So they combine electric guitars with traditional Greek instruments, not necessarily baglamas and juras that I play or other weird instruments that I play, but they also include wind instruments that are. There is an instrument, for example, that looks like bagpipes.
Yes, yeah.
That we have. So this is very nice. I think that the result is very nice, and this is something new. I think it happens within the last 15 years, a dozen of years, something like that.
No, it's good because I think what's unfortunate in a lot of places where you have a particular sort of musical tradition, whether that's Greece, Spain is another example of that. Italy, if you think about traditional Italian music. And it seems a shame for it to become just like, it's the thing that, if you're a tourist and you go to Spain, you expect to see a flamenco guitar player somewhere, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, if you take a musical style like flamenco or something like that, and then put that into, or blend that with a contemporary style of music, I mean, the effects are incredible. And of course, lots of musical styles are that anyway. If you think of like maybe Latin American music, there's that Spanish influence that became something else. And I think that's interesting that that's happening now, which is great, because what's happening over here is we've got a lot of the pop music is terrible, actually. I think, well, okay, probably we always say that, but it really is a bit bland. But there's, it doesn't mean to say that there's not good music happening. It's just what you hear is just so obvious, And I was watching the Glastonbury Festival on TV because the BBC do it, And the performances were great. But of course, a lot of the people that were performing were people that were sort of contemporary with me. They were the Elton Johns and the Cat Stevens and even Guns N' Roses are getting on a bit now, And there were a couple of young bands that were great, but a lot of it was, stuff that's been going for a while, and you think, where is that act that just blows you away, that's incredibly young? And they are out there, obviously, but I don't think not sure that they got enough time. I don't know, I'm just musing on this. But because I think we need to do something, because of the way that things like AI is sort of coming in and everything. We need to, do this thing where we blend ideas and it's performance and the stuff that people have to go and see and experience. And I should think Greek music would be brilliant for that. I mean, I'm sure you could do the Eleusinian Mysteries with rock music or something. No, perhaps we shouldn't do. But you know what I mean? That sort of idea that you could really sort of get into the culture of what you're doing as well. I mean, I think we have to sort of go almost back to that idea, which is presumably where music was at one point. It wasn't just music on its own. It was music in a setting of some sort of ritual or practice or something. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? If you went and saw live music and it was always something that really made you think like it was a show. Yeah. Anyway, that's just a thought, bit of meandering.
Here, the most popular artists nowadays are all trap artists, trap hip hop artists. So it's weird, but I think that they just follow a trend. And since there are so many updates in the music industry, you have to use Spotify, and you have to use to be quick. You have to release a lot of music. You have to release a lot of singles instead of concept albums that great artists used to do in the past and things like that. So I think it's easier for for specific styles of music. So if you just have to create a beat and then recite lyrics, well, of course, sometimes you need to spend a lot of time to write great stories for the lyrics.
Yes, yeah. I've got a couple of friends who are rappers, and they are just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sort of, but you are right from the point of view of putting the sounds together, the beats together, and everything. If you're good at producing, which obviously these guys are because they're DJs as well, then obviously that makes it a lot easier. But I think, well, actually, this is an interesting thing. There's a couple of the music styles that happened in this country that sort of fed sort of punk, or part of the sort of punk movement. There was a style of punk which was in the Medway towns, which is in sort of Kent, out south of London, but towards the river, and it was sort of like Medway garage, which was punk, not the garage that we think of as sort of R&B or whatever it is, right? But it was because they were recording in a garage.
Yeah,
that's where the term came from. So one of the biggest exponents of that is a guy called Billy Childish, who's an artist, very famous artist, and they would record live in just an open space, and then they take the recording on a old Revox, take it into a studio. So it's on open reel, 8-track basically. No, 4-track it would be. And then they just downloaded the stuff and then did the vocals over the top.
All right.
So you could do an album, you could play through a set and you got an album, and then you just go in and put the vocals on. And Bill has recorded around about 150 albums using that technique over the years. And you think, well, that idea is not that dissimilar from the early rock and roll albums.
Yeah.
Because that's how they were recorded, where people played live and they stuck the vocals over the top of it.
Yeah. And
you think, well, maybe we need to get back to that sort of thing where we really push lots of ideas out there. Sometimes you can get something it's produced like the DJ with the beats and all the rest of it, and that sort of high quality sort of recording, down to it being like just utterly raw, but it's more of an experience thing. I think I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm getting a bit long in the tooth for all this, but
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, if you do it like this, there's a different kind of energy, and sometimes you change the tempo and everybody follows, because you need to put more effort and more energy to that point of song. And nowadays you can do that in a DAW, but you have to have an image in your head, to change the tempo within the DAW and persuade everybody else that this is the perfect place to and at the same time to make it perfect at the recording. I mean, if you record everything separately and you ask the drummer to play 3 BPM faster at the chorus and then go back 2 BPM, he has to be alert, and it's not like a natural thing that comes out of him. It's like an instruction that was given by the songwriter. So, yeah, of course, it is very, very different, I think, from what.
Yes, I think that's interesting. You're saying that. I mean, because when you record your songs, or you're doing songwriting, what's your sort of process for? I know this is a bit of a silly question to ask a songwriter, because you've got lots of ways of recording, I know, and writing songs. But what sort of things do you do?
Yeah, well, for the songs, for my songs that when I don't have any collaborators, any co-writers and things like that, I just want to have a very good idea, it doesn't necessarily mean musical idea or lyrical idea. It can be both. If it is a lyrical idea, I want to have a punchline or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would be the chorus or the refrain of the song, but I need to have something in mind that I want to write about that. So if I have that, the most important thing for me is structure. I want to decide if I am going to write a verse-chorus song, or if I'm going to write an AABA or a strophic song or something like that. I know that these are not very popular forms nowadays, in comparison to the verse-chorus, especially if there are too many choruses in the song.
Yeah.
But I like writing songs in all, experimenting with different forms. So when I decide that, I go to the DAW and I try various ideas, rhythmic ideas, various chords, try to sing the punch line in various ways. And if I find something that I like it a lot, perhaps I will spend a couple of days to write a verse or a chorus, and then go back to see if this works for the music that I had in mind. So I'm always going back and forth. I'm not like the guy that does all the lyrics and then tries to put music to lyrics, or vice versa. I want to go all the time back and forth, especially if I have a lot of time to do that. If there's a deadline, then perhaps I don't have the opportunity and to do that. But this is the way I like doing it, because I think a good line can have can drive you to various directions, depending on where you put this line, in which section of your song, and depending on what is the form of the song.
That's interesting. I tend to work like that as well, where I'll have some lyric ideas and I'll have some chord ideas, and then I bounce them backwards and forwards, and one influences the other, and then I think about what everything else is doing, the structure, and then that might change what I'm doing with the lyrics, and then change what so because I just find that's much more organic, somehow, and gives you interesting ideas. Now, you've got a Muddy Waters t-shirt on there.
Oh yeah.
Right. Now, I think Muddy Waters is a perfect example of somebody who could take a form and change it brilliantly. So, like, he could have one riff that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it still sounded absolutely incredible. Or he could sit on one chord for ages and then change. Right? Or he could take a song by somebody else. I mean, the one that sticks out as an example is "Rock Me Baby," so B.B. King's song. And then instead of singing on the 1, he sings on the 4. So he's turned it upside down, and you think, oh my God, that is so brilliant.
Yeah,
it is so brilliant that he could do that. Particularly that if you're totally immersed in a style, it's actually really difficult to see the style in any other way, but he could. And I've always thought Muddy Waters is just brilliant. You sort of look at what he does, and it's like, amazing.
Yes, indeed.
So that's a really good example, isn't it, of how you can change, like you were saying about structure.
Yeah.
And this isn't it's not a popular structure to do this. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's like, it's really to do with the song.
Yeah, and it's also a nice idea to find ways to restrict yourself. If you think that Muddy Waters used only one chord, then try write a song with one chord. This restriction is really hard if you want to make.
It is now. This is interesting because we've just done a summer school that we run every year called Blues Camp, and it's not just blues. It's actually punning on the idea of a boot camp. but we'd often start with the blues or whatever. And we get them to do something simple at the beginning, just to bond as a band, right? Because some of these people have never played in a band before. Some people we get have not really played an instrument for long, so they might be just starting out playing bass or something. But within, an hour and a half, they're actually performing a song to other people. But the next project is to teach them how to songwrite using lots of trickery, right? But one of the things I did this year, because I hadn't done it before, was what you do with like one chord. And because this a sort of great song it's not about how many chords there are, or how clever how complicated the melody is or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It's actually about how it affects you. So I said, there's all these songs with one chord in it. There's some of them that you don't realise there's only one chord in it until you sit down to play it. Things like Exodus by Bob Marley and stuff like that. And you think, God, that's amazing. So we did something where we just played one chord with a groove. And then I stripped it back to just the bass and the drums, with the bass player playing one note. I mean, the guy I work with is brilliant. And because of where he placed the note against the groove of the drums, it was amazing watching people's faces sitting in an audience, because they were just amazed. It was like, my God, that sounds so incredibly good in this one note. And it's that type of thing of really trying to play with people's expectations about what they think makes good music.
Yeah.
Do you have that sort of thing when you're sort of teaching, that you get people coming in with preconceived ideas about what makes good music, or a good guitarist or something, and it's like, it's not really that.
Yeah, sometimes. It depends though, because I teach people of all ages, so it depends. Also, sometimes it's funny because you have 7 or 8 year old and says, "Oh no, that's awful."
Yeah. Yes.
That's funny. But then, yeah. But sometimes, I may teach a 60-year-old, and he doesn't want to listen to other kind of stuff. He only wants to learn one thing. But not only, actually. I used to teach a guy that is, I think it's now about 25 years old, something like that. So I was teaching him for 2 or 3 years acoustic guitar, and he wanted to play, to write actually, Greek folk popular songs.
Right.
So when he learned all the triads and all the bar chords and all the extra positions for the bar chords and the extra positions for the triads in different sets of strings and all these things, he didn't really want to learn seventh chords, or he didn't really want to learn the blues scale, or he didn't really want to learn ninth chords. And it was really funny because for some of this, he would say, "Oh, that sounds amazing," but I cannot use it because I haven't heard that kind of sound in this style of music. So it was really amazing that he was practicing too many hours for the triads and the dominant seventh chords, and his progress was amazing. And he was also writing songs without having a good technique on the guitar. He wrote so many songs within these 2 or 3 years that we're having lessons, but he didn't want to do anything else. He didn't want to learn anything else outside that.
Interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people that turn up, it's like they only want to play this sort of music, and over a period of time, they end up, their musical tastes start to do this. It really sort of develops, because again, it's like a lot of things, isn't it? Sometimes when you get reasonably good with something, or familiar with something, your mind wants to sort of tag onto something else because that's interesting now, instead of it just being this thing, And I've noticed that a lot. So I was quite interested that you should say that this guy didn't want to learn those other things. I thought you were going to say suddenly he was into writing country music or something, or he wanted to do some, some jazz fusion or something in the style of Westport. Yeah, whatever. Awesome stuff. Okay, so yeah, cool. So what are you up to now? Then you're obviously doing a bit of recording and stuff like that, and obviously teaching and finishing off this PhD.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is a practice-based PhD, so I had to do a lot of recordings as well. The thing is that the subject of my PhD has to do with this style of music, the Greek folk rebetiko music, and blues and jazz music. And the reason that I picked that was that there is this urban myth in Greece that rebetiko is the Greek blues.
Okay.
There are several references about that.
Okay.
Even though the scales are completely different, the rhythms are completely different. But strangely, I mean, they try to. If you Google it, you might find some answers about that, and they usually try to say that it's not a musical thing, but a socio-cultural thing, or because bluesmen were slaves at the beginning. They were slaves in the U.S., and then the first rebetiko musicians were either prisoners or marginal people that were composing some of their music in hashish dense places, things like that. So they try to, and they were poor as well. So there are some commonalities, which I suppose there's a common ground between other global styles of music like flamenco that you mentioned before, or Argentinian tango, or Portuguese fado. There is some common ground between them, but there is this myth. So I thought that I should try to make some fusions of rebetiko and blues, and all the songs are different approaches of blending rebetiko with blues and jazz.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds really interesting. Because the thing is, anyway, blues is quite a hodgepodge of things that have obviously arrived at the same or similar sort of period of time. But one of the things I thought was interesting, I was listening to some Mongolian music, as you do, and obviously a lot of Mongolian music is about horses. So you get this dunk, 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 dunk sort of groove, because it sounds like you're on a horse, right? Well, if you think about that, that's not that dissimilar from the sound of a train pulling out of a station type of thing. So you get that sort of slightly shuffly sort of thing. And they also have this thing where they tend to go up a fourth. So you get this sort of change that sounds a bit like blues, So that's just interesting. So I'm quite interested in the what they call it, the background sound for music, whereas like Latin music has got lots of percussion that sounds like cicadas and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And frogs and whatever. And obviously things like blues. There's this thing about the train, whatever. So I'm quite interested in those things where there is a sort of it's rooted in the sound that they could hear around them, and it had a signal. There's a message there and stuff. So maybe there's a certain thing with that, isn't there? With like you're saying, with music like flamenco and whatever, there's a sort of shared commonality about sound. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
And we will never know, really. Anyway, it's just a theory. It's good stuff. Good one. All right then. Well, Nassos, it was brilliant, mate. We've been chatting for nearly an hour, so it's good.
All right.
Cool. Well, wish you all the best with what you're doing. I'll pop some things up in the show notes. So if you know, we'll put some things about you on there. I'm assuming, have you got a website or something that links you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that people can have a listen to what you're doing. It'd be really good.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Perfect. And in a few months, they could perhaps listen to this weird blends that I'm creating now.
Yeah, because you've only got what? When do you finish your
I'm submitting in a few weeks, and I have my Viva in November. And after the Viva, I'm going to do the covers of the album and all that stuff, you know, that involves photos and all that stuff. And then I'm going to release the album.
Good, awesome stuff. Well, I think there's and send my regards to everyone out there, and yeah, hopefully catch up at some point. Let us know when you're over. If you pop over to England, maybe we can meet up. All right, mate. Hang on, just a minute. Sorry. That's all right. Somebody's trying to ring me.
All right. Yeah, hope to see
it. Right. Okay.
Hope to see you soon in person.
Yes. Yes, that'd be great. That'd be really cool, mate. Good. All right. Speak to you soon then.